Think everyone can see. Okay. We're on time, right? So I can start probably. Okay. So everyone can see. Let me see if everything is correct. Okay. Okay. So good morning, everybody there in Peru. It's here in afternoon in Portugal. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope there's no problem me here presenting in English. But if you have any questions or if you need help translating any term, I can try to translating in Spanish. But the best I can do is probably Portuñol, which is a mix of Portuguese and Spanish. So that's the best I can do, probably. So I wanted to thank Dr. Elgar for the cordial invitation for me to present my work here. I also want to thank, well, almost Dr. Alexander Kotrina for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and this probably culminates a beautiful collaboration between here at the Universidad de Évora in Portugal and your university in Peru. So thank you very much. Today I'm going to present to you about LiDAR. So Ingeniero Angel probably presented to you many terms of LiDAR. I also going to present some theory, but I hope it's not too repeated from the other presentation. So to give you a little bit of context before passing on to spaceborne LiDAR and the JEDI instrument, which I am the most experienced about right now. So to give you a brief presentation, thank you for the brief presentation before me presenting. So my name is Lionel. I'm actually a software engineer. I'm a master's in computer science here in University of Évora. So my main interests encompass machine learning and parallel programming. And about a year and a half, I was kind of captured by a remote sensing applications researcher, which is Sergio Godinho. It's right there. I think can you see my mouse? I think so. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Okay. So Sergio is a remote sensing applications researcher. So we kind of saw this beautiful collaboration between him and me. So he has these ideas, I have the tools to make them real, and we built these two frameworks that I'm going to talk to you about today, which is JEDI Pipeline and JEDI Correct. I'm going to talk to you about them a little bit later. So that's me for the presentation. So for today, I will give you some bit of context about spaceborne LiDAR. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about the JEDI mission, which is a NASA instrument on board the ISS. This is a LiDAR mission that can estimate and record the three-dimensional structure of the vegetation globally. So this is near global coverage with a very high resolution LiDAR. It's an instrument, it's amazing instrument for these kind of ecology applications and forestry. So on the second topic, I'm going to talk about the forest vertical structure applications, the main applications of JEDI, what you can do, what you cannot do. and after that, we're going to the main part and the most important part of this presentation, which I'm going to give you a hands-on demonstration of the both frameworks. For our JEDI pipeline, JEDI pipeline is used to download JEDI data, and the JEDI Correct is to mainly correct JEDI on its geolocation factor, which is a huge problem for spaceborne LiDAR instruments. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context before talking about JEDI Correct. Okay. So to give you a brief presentation for LiDAR, it stands for light detection and ranging. Okay. And in contrast to these passive sensors like Sentinel-2, which is or hyperspectral or multispectral, they need a kind of a source of light to record things. So they need that source of light to capture the reflectance of the object of interest, which for us is the Earth. And so LiDAR is an active sensor, which they employ their own light to record their object of interest. So they emit these laser pulses. I think you can, okay. Okay, yeah, it's all good. So they kind of record these laser pulses. And these laser pulses emit like millions of photons. And that instrument captures the return of those photons that are launched in these laser pulses. So there's multiple returns to these LiDAR systems. We have the most common ones. There's another one which is not included in this diagram, which is the photon counting return for the LiDAR. So for discrete returns, what this active sensor does is these laser pulses are called footprints, okay? And when it launches those footprints, the instrument can have some sort of return. So for discrete returns, we have a laser that is emitted, okay? And at different times, there is a kind of a recording of that laser. So there could be multiple returns for the laser. So on the first return, since it arrives at the tree canopy, for example, it records the canopy height of the tree. Okay. The second return could return, I don't know, the middle of the tree. I don't know what it's called in English. And the third return could be the ground return based. Okay, so that's for discrete return LiDAR. For waveform return, we have a continuous waveform, okay? And these returns in waveform are monitored continuously. In contrast to discrete returns, they are recorded in different times, okay? At like 1 second or 1.5 seconds of return. So these waveforms are like recorded in nanosecond returns. So in every nanosecond, there's a return of the photons when they come back up the instrument. So they return this kind of wave that represents the whole canopy until the ground return. Okay. And the another one is a photon counting LiDAR, which is a photon return counting. So it launches the photons and it records and counts each photon returned at a different time. So it's more like a waveform, but the graph, actually it's an histogram. So at this time, it could be like, it could capture 500,000 photons, for example, or at this time it would capture 1,000,000 photons, or just to give you an example, a quick example of how this would turn out. And for the photon counting LiDAR, there's an instrument which is pretty famous actually. It's called the ICESat-2, which is by NASA also. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. It uses the photon counting algorithm for these LiDAR returns. And JEDI uses the full waveform return. Okay, so this here is just to give you a little bit of example. This was a LiDAR instrument mounted on an airplane, and it recorded this is the flight path of the plane. And so it recorded and emitted laser pulses, footprints. In aircraft or airplane LiDAR, there could have like higher than 10 points or 10 footprints, 10 lasers per square meter. Okay. And so this is kind of a final product that is given by airborne laser scanning, which is called. This is a point cloud, and each point has an XYZ coordinate, which represents the whole structure of the landscape. And we can see that there's the trees right there, there's the ground, there's the vegetation under the trees also, if it's not too dense, of course. And there's the electrical poles. And that is quite, it's not noise because it exists there. But if we're going to talk about JEDI, and it's a LiDAR instrument from space, it could capture those electrical poles. And JEDI was designed for ecological applications. So those electrical poles could be noisy to JEDI. And I will also talk about it a little bit later, how to get out of this noise. This is noisy data for JEDI. Okay, so to continue, these LiDAR systems can be mounted in multiple platforms. I think you all know this. So there's the most basic one and the most high resolution one. It's TLS, which is tripod mounted scanners on the ground, which scan the whole vicinity of a forest. And they scan pretty detailed maps for the forest, but it's really niche. It's really small area. So this is used for forest structure calibration in the forest, for example, phenotyping. It could also be used for archaeology if you want. There's another application. And we also have airborne laser scanning, which I just talked to you about. That was the example from the last slide. These are LiDAR instruments mounted on aircraft or even helicopters. And they also have high point density per square meter. So it's higher than 10 points, probably. Most modern LiDAR instruments right now have that resolution, but it's not too detailed in contrast to TLS. There's another one here in the middle, which I forgot to mention about. It's an emerging field. It's UAV laser scanning, which you use drones. It doesn't have the resolution that TLS has, but it has the how do you say it? So it's more convenient than ALS. So it's more costly to use ALS rather than using a drone, for example. That's just an example, of course. And which I will lead you to this. We also have spaceborne LiDAR, which are LiDAR instruments mounted on satellites up there. So we also have ISAT, which I just talked to you about. These are satellite mounted instruments that have a moderate resolution to what they are, since they emit laser pulses from space. And these laser pulses, they get through a lot. So they travel a great distance. They pass on atmospheric interference, sun position, for example, dense cloud cover, for example. These instruments cannot pass through dense cloud cover, as with Sentinel-2, for example. And that's why we use ALS for getting around this dense cloud cover and for the resolution. But the main important part of spaceborne LiDAR is its global coverage. So there's a lot of samples distributed globally that we can always use. And this type of data, there's also JEDI. Okay, yeah, there it is. So both satellites were both launched by NASA, and they have their data availability is free. Their data is free. It's open access. You can download the data, both for ISAT and JEDI. Okay, so today I'm just going to focus on JEDI. I don't know much about ISAT2. I'm sorry. Today I'm going to talk about JEDI. This is what I've been working on for a year and a half. So let's go for JEDI. Okay. So what is JEDI? I think most of you know what it is. For those who don't know, it stands for Global Ecosystem Dynamics Investigation, which by its name basically tells you what it does. So it monitors the vegetation globally, and it measures three-dimensional vegetation globally also. So it was launched in 2018. It's on the ISS, on the Japanese module. It was launched in 2018. It started recording data in 2019, and its data became available in 2020. Okay, so we have data from 2019 up to 2023. Okay, the mission stopped for quite a while, about a year later, and right now it's started recording data again. So we have data for end of 2024 and 2025 right now. So this instrument, what it does, it fires 3 lasers. Okay, these lasers are tethered. Okay, so they are split into 2, and these lasers fire. Each laser fires at a 242 hertz, okay, frequency. And since they are split in 2, each beam, as I would call it, that's the beam, that's the split in 2. These 3 lasers are tethered, and they produce 8 parallel beams. And 4 beams are low coverage, which are low power beams, which are not as strong, but they kind of capture the whole basic structure of the vegetation and ground. And there's the strong beams, which are full power beams. And these are a lot stronger. They're not as noisy as the low power. There's a lot of research going around this on what beams to use. And so these beams fire footprints, okay, at 25 meters on diameter on Earth. So it could be a lot. But this is very high resolution for global coverage, okay? And this instrument doesn't stop. So it conducts day and night, and its global coverage is between these coordinates right here. And it misses the polar kind of thing. That's why we have ISAT2, which was made for the polars, okay? And it's interesting because researchers found that ISAT2 also has interesting applications in ecology and forestry. So there's a lot of research going around that. So to demonstrate you, okay, so here's the graph here on the right. It shows you the waveform I just talked to you about. This is a recording of a JEDI footprint. This waveform represents the footprint on the right, and it records this waveform, okay? So we can see that there's the amplitude is higher when on the tree canopy, okay? On the canopy top of the tree, where most of the energy is reflected. And we also have some energy, and the amplitude it's okay for the vegetation around here, okay? And then there's the ground return, which is a peak here, which represents the ground return. There's also another graph right here, which is this line, which is the relative height profile. Okay, this is one of the main interesting things about JEDI. So the relative height profile, I'm going to talk to you later about this, but it represents the height above ground of the energy reflected. So you could look at the RH profile, for example, to see what's the canopy height of a tree, for example, or where biomass estimations, for example. So I'll just talk about it a little bit earlier. Okay. So here's a video. This is from NASA's official channel, just to demonstrate how the instrument fires its footprints. So here is JEDI. The instrument looks like a fridge aboard the ISS. There's the 3 lasers, which are LiDAR, okay? And so these lasers fire footprints in 8 beams on Earth in a 4.2 kilometer swath, okay? And there's the footprints, which record the vegetation. That's the waveform and the ground return, okay? So just to give you a little bit of context. And okay, yeah. So here's another good example. This is the footprint distribution, how JEDI distributes its footprints. There's the global coverage I just talked to you about. So there are some places which are not recorded by JEDI, but someday or sometime it will, because this instrument has a revisit time quite often, and it records even with sparse data, like we're seeing right here. This is in America. Even with sparse data, we can do so much stuff with this. Train machine learning models, to canopy height models, to fuse with other data, okay, to do our research task. So this is an example of the JEDI sampling on Earth. Okay. So JEDI has 2 versions. The version 1 was it was the first version, as the name implies it, and it was not corrected. Its geolocation was not corrected. So by this I mean its bias is systematic bias, which was GPS calibration, for example. The geolocation, what it is a footprint on Earth, which we see on Earth. It could be, there's an error, there's an associated error with it, where a footprint could be in another place around the reported footprint. So when I talk about geolocation error, that's what I mean. And so version 2 data improved this geolocation accuracy by correcting its systematic bias on because of the GPS and also the ISS, which is not stable, of course. But it doesn't correct for random errors, probably. The random errors, I say, random errors are kind of atmospheric interference, for example. They are the people inside the ISS. That's a random error, which caused the ISS to vibrate. And this vibration causes JEDI to have a geolocation error. There's a lot going on around here. And so with version 2, they also reduced their file size on the data, and they also incorporated another land cover dataset, such as SRTM, to compare terrain. So JEDI has its terrain return, and it also has the SRTM terrain return for that specific location. Okay, so for the user to compare, if both of these variables do not match, the footprint is noisy, and it could be discarded, for example, because this affects the relative height variable I just talked to you about. It affects biomass estimations. It affects everything. So keep that in mind. So there's a lot of filtering going around here on these JEDI footprints. So there's a lot of data products also. They kind of divided this into multiple groups. For example, if you only want the raw waveforms of Jedi, you would have to choose product L1A, but I think it's not available. So you have to use L1B, which are the waveforms, but they are geolocated, okay? For L2A data products, these are the same footprint. So each footprint has a different processing method, which are these data products. So each level here in the data product is a different level of processing. Okay, so L2A can have the ground elevation, the relative height profile, for example, canopy top height, for example. If you go over L2B, you will have on the same footprint, of course, different variables for leaf area index, for example, plant area index, canopy cover fraction, for example. If you go over to L4A, this is the most important part for above ground biomass estimations. And L3 and L4B, I haven't used that much, but they're kind of they're spatially distributed in grids, in 1 kilometer grids. So each footprint is 1 kilometer. And these products, I haven't seen much use of these products, but I hope there's someone who could use them, of course. So I probably used very much the L1B data product for the waveforms, and I've used a lot of L2A data product for the relative height profile. These are the two, I think these are the two most important data products that you can use for Jedi data and for your application. So to talk about more about this relative height profile, we have this graph, which is taken from Laura Dickinson article. I have the citation at the end of the presentation and materials for you to use. So what is this relative height profile? It's the relative height above ground at which a specific percentage of the total returned waveform energy has been received. So for example, if you have RH50, it means that 50% of the energy was returned to the instrument, which means that the other 50% was not returned. It was dispersed through everywhere. Okay, this explains it penetrating the canopy and the forest to see what's going on inside. Okay, and we use this variable a lot, which is called the RH95 or the RH98. There's a lot of debate going on between these two, but it mainly represents the canopy top, okay, at which the 95% or 98% of the total energy that was emitted was returned from that canopy top. So this is a very important variable for ecological applications. Okay, so going on these applications with Jedi, I've put these two maps. These are the most basic applications of Jedi I could find. They're on the Jedi website. So basically, you can map biomass. Well, this graph maps biomass globally. Okay. There's the mean and standard error for above ground biomass. And you can also model ecosystems and canopy height models. So in this map here, this is by the first graph is by Dubaya, which is the main leader of the Jedi mission. And this map on the bottom is by Nico Lang, which made a canopy height model of the Earth using this JEDI data and deep learning. So he fused with Sentinel-2 to perform this map. So I think the most sensible approach and the most obvious application for forest vertical structuring and biomass mapping and this modeling of the structure of the forests is more used fusing with other data. So if you fuse it with multispectral data, if you fuse it with hyperspectral data, if you fuse it with radar, for example, you can get pretty good product. Okay, so Wenlu Key used the Tandem X radar with JEDI to estimate forest biomass, for example. There's the article I just talked to you about Nicolank. So he used Sentinel-2 and JEDI and he used this so every footprint was the center of the image, and he used a deep learning model for this. So each footprint in the center, so each footprint was in the center, and then it produced a 9x9 or a 15 by 15 image pixel. So these were 15 pixels by 15 pixels image of Sentinel-2 bands, and he used only the canopy height top of the JEDI footprint, which is this RH98. I can't quite remember if he used 95 or 98. So he used this variable. He used Sentinel-2. He fused them together. He trained the AI model for this, and the AI model, the deep learning model, gave this detailed canopy height model of the Earth at a 10-meter resolution. It's brutal. So in this paper, Morin, he also used multi-sensor satellite imagery with JEDI. This is a preprint I found. So basically, I'm showing you this to confirm that you have to fuse data if you want to get a product or a project done out of this. Okay. So you have to fuse it with Sentinel-2, you have to use it with Sentinel-1 or Pulsar or anything like that to make kind of JEDI work, okay? But JEDI by itself is a good estimator of biomass, for example, or the relative height profile. Okay, so here's another problem. No instrument is quite perfect. And since this is a spaceborne LiDAR mission, there's a lot of noise going around here. I just told you about. And even if they corrected from version 1 to version 2, even if they corrected the bias or the systematic error of the JEDI footprints, the version 2 still exhibits a 10.3 meter horizontal accuracy. So in this example, I'm just giving you this. A reported JEDI footprint on a given position may not be its actual position, but it could be around it, okay? It could be in 10.3 meters if we're talking about a very noisy footprint, okay? And so to mitigate this, before they launched the program for JEDI, they built the JEDI simulator program, which is written in C. And the JEDI program incorporates a lot of other programs for JEDI simulation. Like the framework takes a ALS dataset. Okay, this is the airborne laser scanning dataset, which is the point cloud. It takes that. It takes a couple of coordinates, geographical coordinates, and it tries to simulate JEDI-like footprints on those coordinates using the ALS. That's what the program does. That's what Jedi Rat does, for example. And it also has another program, which is called collocate waves. So the collocate waves program tries to correct the systematic error of the Jedi footprints. Okay. As my saying, we say this in our laboratory. This is the orbit level approach. Okay. So when we're correcting Jedi at an orbit level, it means this. So Jedi Simulator Collocate Waves program corrects using orbit level. What this means is the entire orbit of Jedi, 8 beams, all 8 beams are transformed into a, they have an offset, okay? So for example, for each footprint, there are multiple tries on multiple offsets, okay? And they try to find the best offset given a metric, okay? And the metric that Jedi Simulator and Collocate Waves uses is Pearson's correlation, okay? So they try to find for every footprint, okay, moved to one specific offset, let's say 1 meter apart on the left, okay? So they try to calculate the Pearson's correlation across all footprints of the orbit, and it will give a final Pearson's correlation, an R squared, okay? And so the better R squared for each offset, well, for each offset, there's an R, okay? And it finds the best R across all offsets. And it corrects, so it moves every single footprint to a specific offset, okay? I will show you this a little bit later on how this works, okay? And so this is where our second project comes in, which is Jedi Correct. So this is kind of an extension. It's kind of well, it's more modernized. It's more, I wouldn't say efficient, but it's more user friendly than Jedi Simulator. Jedi Simulator takes a lot of setup for the average end user. It's a lot to take in. Even for me as a computer science master's, I had quite a little bit of trouble reading his code and trying to set up our experiments using Jedi Simulator. So we built this framework, Jedi Correct, as an extension to it. So it also uses Jedi Simulator to simulate the footprints, but it also has better metrics, I would say, and parallel processing methods to handle large-scale data sets. If you want to correct at a national scale, for example, here in Portugal is a very small country. So even if I would correct for the entire Portugal using the Jedi Simulator, it could take probably some days because it uses only one core. It uses only one worker to process that data. But if you use Jedi Correct, our approach can use multiple cores and it can use multiple workers to try and tackle around that data. Okay. So, okay. So this is the most important part of the presentation, I think. So I will demonstrate to you how to download Jedi data. Okay. We're going to work on a sample study area I chose here in Portugal. We're going to download the data. We are going to, I'm going to tell you what are the best practices that you can use that you can use to your favor using Jedi data. Like, for example, filtering. There's a lot of filters around there. And secondly, we are going to try correct the same Jedi data we downloaded using a ALS flight for that same study area. So for example, in that study area I chose, we have ALS flight to try and correct those JEDI data. This is the only caveat of this framework, is that you have to take JEDI data and you need to have ALS flight, for example. There are other frameworks, for example, for geolocation correction. For example, GeoJEDI, it is written in R, and it uses a terrain elevation model to correct those JEDI footprints. Okay. However, if you go, well, I'm just going to say our example here in Portugal, the terrain doesn't change that much in the landscape. Okay. These are very tiny changes around our landscape. And so GeoJEDI could or could not be as efficient as with other metrics. Like, for example, JEDI correct tries to match its waveform and its relative height profile between the reported JEDI footprint and the simulated JEDI footprint. Okay. So I will talk about it a little bit later, sorry. So, okay, so let's go. I have to share another screen right now. Let me go to the presentation. I will stop presenting and I will show you another window, okay? Okay, I hope you can see it. This is our work computer. Yeah, okay. Okay, I hope it's all is well. Okay. Okay, so to show you, this is the sample area I chose, which we have an ALS flight. This is on the south center of Portugal. Évora is around here. That's where I am, and so it's quite close to me, this area. So this area is quite plain in terms of terrain. But if we go to its landscape, for example, we see montados, okay? So the montados, I'm going to show you an image of this. This is a montado, okay? These are landscapes that are filled with cork oak trees. This is where the cork is made, okay? So as you can see through the image, this is a very, let me see this. No, okay, I'll just go back. Yeah, I'll just go back. Okay. So if you see, as you can see, this is mostly a heterogeneous landscape. Okay. This is not very homogeneous because in one moment you can have these trees, in another moment you can have a water body, in another moment you can have bushes, in another moment you can have different trees, for example, and such. When JEDI records these footprints on this landscape, and they have, of course, a reported geolocation error, if we plan to make a canopy height map of this landscape, it could be a few meters wrong, okay? Because only of this geolocation accuracy, okay? So to give you an example of how this area looks like. Okay, so we have this area, okay? And I want to download JEDI data, okay? And the first thing I would do is, the first thing every user does is go to Earth data search for NASA. Okay. If I search here Jedi, it will lead me to, let me skip the tour. Okay. It will lead me to a data repository of the various Jedi data products. Okay. So we have here lots of data products. We have Levis, of course, which was the first mission before Jedi, LiDAR mission before Jedi. So let's say I want to download L2A data product for a specific area. I would go over here to the map. Okay. I would import my area. I'll just going to draw a rectangle around here. So it's around here, probably. Okay. So this is the area. Let's wait a little bit. Okay. So let's say I wanted Jedi L2A data for this. This is version 2. I would select this, and it would try to search all of the orbit passes on that area. So we'll just wait a little bit. We'll see every orbit that passes through that area. Okay. It takes a little bit of time. Okay. So for example, let's select 2024 data. Okay. If I hover my mouse over this data set, it selects me, that orbit. And when I choose it to download, it will show the entire orbit of Jedi on that time, for that hour. Okay. So I think this orbit went around like this. Okay. And you have other information of this data. And if I wanted to download this data, I would click the download granular data. Oh, I forgot to mention, before you download this data, you need to have an account on Earth Data. This is my account. You need to register for before downloading this Jedi data. So you go over to earthdata.nasa.gov and you log in. And after logging in, this is the login page. You can access this Jedi data. Okay. So before downloading, this is the file. Okay, this is the link. This leads to the link where the file is on the servers. So this is an H5 file. Most of you don't have access or means. Well, let's just say for the end user, of course. For the end user, he just wants to see and he just wants to manipulate that data. But it is in H5 format. So you would have to use a program or some code to transform this H5 data into something that QGs could read. Okay. And when you download this, it downloads the entire orbit from here, from Africa to North America. Okay. So this could be gigabytes of data. Okay. It is not clipped to your area of preference. Okay. So you wouldn't have to download this data, which is not in a format you could read automatically. You would then have to process it to clip to our study area. And finally, you would, this file contains all of the variables. There's like hundreds of variables in this data. Let me show you something. So Jedi data product L2A data dictionary. Okay. If you go over to this dictionary, if you search for the data product for Jedi dictionary, you would see all of the variables available in that file. Okay, so this is these are all the variables, their format, the data type they're in, the variable name, in the units they are in, and some kind of description of the variable. Okay. And so this file is a lot to handle. So you would have to search, you would have to process this data, and you would have to waste time trying to download every Jedi data that passes through this study area, because I think you would have, I think you can select multiple files, okay, and you can download them in batches, but this takes quite some time and processing. So where am I reaching with this? I am going to show you our first um, framework, okay, which is called Jedi Pipeline. This is the first task on how to download Jedi data. So our framework handles this entire process of downloading Jedi data, clipping to a specific study area, and selecting the relevant variables that you can use, ready to use, and output that data in, let's say, in a shapefile or in a geopackage file format. It handles this all in one sitting, okay, all in one script. So the user can install this framework. The user only has to run one command, and this framework does everything for him. Okay. So this is much easier for the end user. This is the GitHub page. The framework is free to use. It's open source. You can actually, if you want to, you can suggest code modifications by opening an issue or a pull request if you want. So in this GitHub page, there is the description of the framework. You can read it after this. This explains how the framework works basically and why we built it. Here's the fun part. There's the installation method for Jedi Pipeline. These frameworks are written in Python, and I made them on a Linux environment. But right now I'm using Windows. So if you use Windows, and to use these frameworks, you would have to install a Windows subsystem, okay, for Linux. Right now I'm using Ubuntu. Okay, if I search here for Ubuntu, it shows me the subsystem for Ubuntu, and I can just run the command line and run these programs. Okay, so right now there's no Windows support, but I plan to add the support later for both frameworks, for Jedi Pipeline and for Jedi Correct. Okay. Okay, so we head over to QGIS. We have our study area. Okay, I'm going to show you the pipeline. I got some problems downloading the Jedi data because their data repository is quite changing from website to website, and so I had to change my password this morning. And for some reason, the framework or the credentials that I use to log in on the data center, at their data center, is not updated yet. Okay, but I will show you how you would run Jedi Pipeline. You first have to have Python installed and have Anaconda installed. The Anaconda program, it creates virtual environments. And this virtual environment is where you run and install the necessary packages and requirements to run these frameworks. So you follow these instructions. I think they are very clear. The user must have a registered Earth Data account, I just told you about, and it must have Python installed, and also Anaconda. Okay. So you begin by creating the virtual environment. using the file provided in the repository. Okay, you clone the repository through GitHub, and you install the Anaconda virtual environment inside the JEDI pipeline folder. Okay. So after installing and after setting up the virtual environment, I'm going to show you how JEDI pipeline works. So to run the main program, which is JEDI pipeline.py, you run it by spawning the Python program. You specify the program you want to run, which is JEDI pipeline. And this script has a argument parser, which the user can select multiple arguments for its specific needs. Okay. And if I specify an argument called help, it shows me the description of the script and all of the available options to run the script. Okay. So at first glance, there's a lot of arguments going around here. Let me tell you, JEDI Correct has much more than this, but these are very simple. Okay, so to run this program, you have to specify a directory to save the JEDI files, to save the downloaded JEDI files that the framework downloads. You have to specify the JEDI product you want. If you want JEDI L1B for the waveforms, you would have to select JEDI 01B. If you wanted JEDI L2A data product for the relative height profile, you select the JEDI 02_A. Okay. The framework also gives you the option to specify the JEDI product version, but I think version 1 is being deleted on their data centers. I can't confirm this, but it's safer to just leave this option at 002, which is version 2 data. Okay. And so to specify the other arguments, you need to have your start date for the time period of interest. Okay. At which point of time do you want JEDI files to pass on your region of interest? You have the end date. Let's say you only wanted JEDI data from 2020 on May, on the month of May, for example. You would specify, I will show you right now. So to run the program, you first spawn the Python program. You specify the script JEDI pipeline, and you start inputting those arguments. So for the directory I will want to put this in a folder inside this folder. So it's PT area, which is this folder right here. Okay. For the product, we open quotation marks and we specify, okay, I only want JEDI L2A data for my region of interest. Okay. At version 2. So we specify the version. Okay. And let's say I only wanted JEDI data from 2020. Okay. Let's say 2020 on the for the month of May. So we include those dates on 1st of May on 2020, and we end at 2020, 30th, 1st of May. Okay. Okay. So how do we specify our area of interest? We specify using ROI, which is the region of interest. Okay. And And the only valid input, I wanted to implement the user putting a shapefile. Okay, so it would be much, much easier. But right now, the only valid inputs for the region of interest are bounding box coordinates. So we put the upper left box coordinates and the lower right coordinates. So for example, here in our area, the bounding box is created by specifying the latitude and longitude of this upper left coordinate, and then the other coordinates are on the lower right. We specify also the latitude and longitude of the lower right box. Okay, so and that's how the box is constructed. Okay, so how do you specify those coordinates? These coordinates must be in decimal degrees. Okay, in not in WGS 84, which is the standard coordinate system for JEDI. You want to put in UTM system coordinates. So for this area here in Portugal, this is on a different coordinate system, but I already have the decimal coordinates for this. So you would have to see the coordinates here on QGIS and calculate the decimal coordinates. Okay, so let's try downloading this data. So for our region of interest, I'm going to put the decimal coordinates. Okay. And to separate, this is the latitude. Okay. This is the latitude of the upper left latitude. Okay. And to introduce the next coordinate, we put a comma. Okay. For the upper left longitude. So we put our specified coordinates. Okay. And then for the next coordinates, we put the lower right latitude and the lower right longitude, which is this area, which is this area right here. Okay. So let me put those coordinates, and I hope that the login doesn't fail. If it fails for me, don't worry. You can try it at home if you would like. Okay. So this is the region of interest. Okay. We also have other arguments which I didn't tell you about, but because they are not mandatory. Okay. So you can specify the beams that you want for the JEDI data. For example, if you wanted only the coverage beams, which are the low power beams, you would have to specify them yourself. Okay. But if you want all beams, you just leave this option out. Okay. And for the specific science datasets, these are the science datasets are the variables recorded in the JEDI data. So if you want to include another variable other than if you go over to, it's the subset. Okay. If you go over to here, you can see the default variables for each data product. Okay. And if you wanted to add another variable, you would specify this argument, the SDS, and you just tell it what variable you wanted to record on the data. And finally, the last argument is login keep. This is to include this option just because it saves the Earth data credentials, so you don't have to input them every time you would download the JEDI data. So fingers crossed. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't work, don't worry. I'll show you. Okay, so it is asking me for the first time. So he doesn't have my data, my credentials. For the first time, he's going to ask you the credentials. So you put the username and then the password. Okay. and let's hope the password is updated in their systems. Okay. Okay, it is still not. Okay. But if you register and you put your credentials on the framework, it will work, surely. Okay. So right here, this is the initial part of the framework. It finds Jedi orbits over the bounding bots we just specified. So he found 135 orbits for that bounding box for all time. Okay. But between these dates we just specified, there are 4 orbits. Okay. So we first searches all the orbits that pass on the region of interest, and then it tries to clip on those dates. Okay. And between those dates, between the month of May, it passed 4 Jedi orbits around that area. So far so good. It also tells you the estimated download size for the Jedi footprints, so that you can save some disk space if you want. And it also saves the download links on this text file, on the folder you specified. Okay. So in each line, there is the link I just told you about. So in this link, you would download the H5 file. Okay. But when you run Jedi Pipeline, it downloads that H5 file. Unfortunately, I don't have a screenshot to show you how it is. It would download the H5 file. It would clip to that region of interest you specified, and then it would select the variables, the default variables for the data product. So for L2A, it would select those variables. It would select the latitude and longitude of each footprint, shot number, which is a unique identifier for each footprint, and the most importantly right here is the RH flag, okay, which is the RH flag, the RH profile, okay. So it would select those variables on that H5 file, and it will output in GeoPackage format, okay. And that GeoPackage format is more recognizable because you can read it on QGIS. So I selected one sample file. This one is from 2021, okay? And I selected this example file for this study area. This was downloaded using Jedi Pipeline, okay? So we have 2 data products here. We have L1B and L2A. L1B is for waveforms, okay? Let me select only L1B. Let me select a sample footprint, okay? And if we check the variables right here, it shows you the beam that it was belongs to, the shot number, which is the unique identifier, coordinates, and the waveform, the raw waveform, which is recorded in these numbers. This is a list of waveform amplitudes, if you would say, okay? And on that same footprint, let me put this on top. On that same footprint, if we select L2A data product, there's the same information, okay? There's also the digital elevation model for SRTM, and then there's the relative height profile, okay? So this goes from 0 up to 100, okay? And I would say that in this spot right here, okay, let's zoom in. Okay, this is 1B. Let me take this out, okay? So for this spot right here, we would have a canopy height top of 2.69 meters, okay? This could be or not true, but because we don't have confirmation of the geolocation impact on this location. But I will show you the corrected file for this. Okay. So this is how you download JEDI data. And this is the entire orbit that JEDI gives you. Okay. However, there's lots of noise going around here on this JEDI data. Let me show you something. Okay. So in these variables right here, there's the degrade flag, which is, if you go to the data dictionary right here, it shows you that this is the flag indicated a degraded state of pointing or position information. So it's kind of a quality metric to a JEDI footprint. Okay. And we also have the quality flag. Okay. If the quality flag is not 1, which means it's not true, it means that there is no quality associated on that footprint. So these two variables are the most important ones for filtering out JEDI footprints. Okay. If you want the most quality footprints, NASA recommends this, is filtering out footprints that are degrade flag 0 and quality flag 1. These are the best footprints. Okay. If we filter out, let's filter out just really quick. So if we select the degraded flag 0 and the quality flag 1, let's head over here. Okay. Let's select the features. Okay. And let's see them on QGIS. So using this only filter, half of the footprints are discarded. Okay. Half of the footprints are not good for processing. And if we delete those, let me just delete this. Let's invert the selection and then no, delete the features. Okay. Yeah, we'll just delete the features. Okay, let's save and then. So you would have something like this. Okay. But if you want more filters, you can keep adding more filters. Like, for example, for your specific landscape here in Portugal, for example, we don't see trees over probably 20 meters high. Okay. So you would have to apply a filter to this data for, if we select the yes, okay. If we select the canopy top, which is RH9098, if we select this less than 20 meters, okay, if we apply this filter, let's select this. Okay, great. So every footprint here has less than 20 meters. So really good, okay. Which means that these the grade flags and quality flags are really good in predicting which footprints are usable and which footprints are not. Okay. Okay, so this is one of many filters that you can use. And this is good by itself. Okay. You could try tailor it other filters according to your specific needs. Okay. Like the RH98 less than 20, we just talked about, for your specific landscape. For example, the number of detected modes. This is kind of the discrete return I talked to you about at the start of the presentation. So if JEDI only detects one mode of the waveform, it only detected the ground. Okay. But if it detects other modes like canopy top, middle of vegetation, and the ground, it would have a number 3 in here. And these detected modes are derived from the raw waveform on the L1B data product. So for example, you could put another filter which means that, for example, if you have a tree, if you have vegetation, sorry, on this area that is higher than 5 meters, and this higher than 5 meters means that there's a tree lying around there, but if it only detects one mode, which is only detecting the ground return, that footprint is not that good because it only detected one mode for the ground, and it is telling us it is telling us contrary information. Okay, so if we have a tree of 5 meters and only one mode of return, it's probably not good. Okay. Okay, so you can filter out these footprints. You can play around with this, but for your ecological applications, this is more than enough. Okay, probably more than enough. If you filter out more footprints or just include very high quality footprints, even if there is sparse data like this data is very valuable, okay, for your kind of application. And it's not like a Sentinel-2 image, for example, where each pixel corresponds to certain reflectance on a certain band. Having this sparse data describing vegetation structure, it's a very important asset, okay? Moreover, this is only one orbit, okay? This is only one pass of the Jedi. If you wanted more, you could add more time. You can add a higher timestamp to your study area. Okay, so this is on one day Jedi pass through here. On another day, it could pass through here, encompassing a lot of footprints around here. So this is just the corner of the box, but if Jedi passes through here, it gives you a lot of footprints, okay, for you to work on. So this kind of detail and temporal resolution of Jedi, it's what makes it very valuable as a spaceborne LiDAR instrument, okay? So this is for Jedi pipeline, okay? Now, if you want more niche or more high quality footprints, you would say to me, this is not enough. These footprints are not enough for me. Let's correct them. I have an ALS on that area, and I want to correct Jedi footprints, geolocation position. So let's go over to the second framework. This is Jedi Correct. It basically corrects Jedi geolocation, okay, at different levels. These levels I just talked to you about. I talked about the orbit level approach, okay? The orbit level approach corrects all of those footprints. Let me put this, okay? Corrects all of these footprints to a specific location, okay? So it moves some meters, all of them, to the same offset, okay? We also have correction at the beam level, whereas each beam is corrected independently. So this is a beam, okay? This is beam 000. This is low power beam, okay? So for this beam, you would have a specific offset. Imagine that this beam would move to this side. And for another beam, you would have another, okay, I selected multiple footprints. And for this beam, which is 0001, you would have a different offset than of the first one, okay? So imagine that this beam would move to here. This beam would move through here on the bottom, this one up, for example, okay? And here comes the fun part. We also correct at the footprint level, okay? Where each footprint moves independently. Okay, so for each footprint, we will have a specific offset that corrects each footprint. This is probably the most sensible approach to this kind of landscape. Okay, this really depends on your study area. If you're working on Portugal, for example, it is a very heterogeneous area. So you would need to correct these footprints at a footprint level. Okay. But if you go to the Amazon, where forests are dense, they're almost the same height, probably, and probably Jedi could penetrate those canopies, but it's quite hard to do. You would probably choose the orbit level approach or the beam level approach. Okay, so this really depends on your study area. Okay, so these are the three correction levels. We also use other criteria, and this criteria is used to compare the simulated footprints and the reported footprints. Okay, so Jedi Simulator uses Pearson's correlation, but Jedi Correct, also using Pearson's correlation, uses other similarity metrics that account for the curve of the waveform, which are very important, and the superposition or alignment of the waveforms. So if both waveforms are aligned and superpositioned, and they have the same curve between a simulated footprint, imagine that we simulate a footprint. Okay, so for this footprint, there's a geolocation error. Okay, and we simulate the footprint 2 here. If those footprints match on the same waveform and the same curve of the waveform, then the actual Jedi position would be around here on the simulated footprint location. Okay, and we can confirm this if Jedi is doing a great job or not is by also simulating on the reported location. Okay, if we simulate on this reported location and the reported waveform and the simulated waveform do not match, it is because Jedi actual position, it's not there. Okay, so that confirms it. Okay, so for different metrics you use distance metrics like curve root sum square differential area. You can read them more about here on this framework. Okay, or just by reading the code. We also use callback labeler divergence to calculate the amount of information that we would need to complete both waveforms. And if we would not need any information, imagine that the callback labeler variable would give a value of 0. We would not need any more anything to correct or to correct that waveform. Okay, so if KL metric is 0, let's say for the past example I just gave you, if we simulated this footprint and KL is 0 here, that means that both curves are the same. Okay, and if both curves are the same and they are superpositioned, it means that Jedi is around there. Okay, many other metrics. Okay, so you feel free to explore it at your discretion. Okay, so let me give you an example. Okay, so to set up Jedi Correct, you would need two data products. Okay, you need the L1B data product for the raw waveforms. This is where we compare both curves, okay? And you would need L2A data product for the relative height profile matching, okay? So you can download these using Jedi Pipeline. We also recommend it here. You can download them using Jedi Pipeline. You download both, and then you run a script that is inside the framework of Jedi Correct. It merges, and then it also filters out some of the good footprints. So let me show you here. So ignore all those folders and all of those work folders. It's kind of hard to keep this up. So if you go to this script, we can see that both data products are being merged, and it also recommends some filtering conditions like the degrade flag 0 and the quality flag 1. It also recommends that the sensitivity is higher than 90%. The sensitivity means that it's another qualitative metric of the Jedi footprint. Okay. It also queries out the solar elevation variable less than 0. So the solar elevation variable represents the solar elevation at the time the footprint was recorded. So if the solar elevation is positive, it was daylight, okay? And on daylight, there could be noise, okay? For photons could disperse around there. So there could be some noise, okay? But if we only keep footprints that are taken at night, okay? So a negative solar elevation represents that the footprint was taken during the night. And during the night, there's no noise, okay? And these are specific recommended filters for Jedi Correct, okay? These are the canopy height less than 30 meters example I just gave you, and the number of detected modes and the RH95 filter I also just told you about, okay? So you run the script, you merge these two data, and after merging these two data, this is the data, okay? I'll show you the variables. So we have beam, the shot number, of course, the latitude and longitude. We have the raw waveform here, and then we have the relative height profile here, okay? So normally you would have to download both separately. This script does it for you in merging those two data sets and is ready for to incorporate on the Jedi Correct framework. So there's one. Number two, you need an ALS flight passing on this area, okay? Or passing on your region of interest where your ready to be corrected Jedi footprints sit, okay? So you need to have this data. Okay, and if we run the same command and the script, it's this one, okay? It's jedicorrect.py, and if we dash it to help, it will show us the available arguments to run this program, okay? So the data sets I talked to you about, the local directory where all Jedi files will need to be corrected, okay? This is the directory for the Jedi files, or you could just input one Jedi file to be corrected. The ALS directory of the last files for the ALS flight that must intersect with the Jedi footprints. The output directory in which to save the corrected Jedi footprints, okay? And there's a lot of arguments around here. So you can save the simulated points around each footprint, for example. There's the mode. The mode selects either orbit level, beam level, or footprint level. Ignore this. I'll just keep this out because I still have to update the Jedi Correct framework. The criteria, which I just talked to you about. So if you want, this is the available criteria. Let me show you. Okay. So we have, for correlation-based method, we have Pearson's correlation and Spearman's correlation for the waveforms. For the wave distance, this is the curve root sum squared differential area for both waves. KL is the callback labeler divergence. RH distance is the curve root sum squared differential area, but for the relative height profile, okay, of both waveforms. And we also have a terrain matching method where you can align both terrain, both ALS, terrain, and the Jedi simulations, okay? So you can use that criteria. And we have additional arguments for both orbit level and beam level and footprint level, which is the grid size. The size of the grid is a grid of points where where simulations of Jedi will happen. Okay, so if you want a 10 by 10 grid of spaced across 1 meter, so you have a grid of 10 by 10 possible offsets, it will simulate footprints for those offsets and calculate on those metrics between that offset's position of the simulated footprint and the reported original footprint. Okay. And the cherry on top of the cake is the parallel processing method, which you can use if you want to handle large scale data sets. If you want to include this option, you include it by saying you want parallelization, and then you select the number of processes you want to use for your parallel processing data. Okay. So time is running out a little bit, so sorry about that. So I'll just show you how Jedi corrects this. Okay, so if we correct at the orbit level, we can see that there is a small offset, okay, on those footprints. And let's select this. So it will tell us the offset at which the Jedi footprint was corrected using the callback labeler distance. Okay. There it is. So the entire orbit was moved to 7 meters on the right and 7 meters to the bottom. Okay, so the entire orbit was moved to this specific offset. For the beam level, it would move to a specific offset for each beam. If we used at the footprint level, okay, we can see that each footprint moves to a specific location. Okay, so each specific location is offsetted. Okay, to each footprint is offsetted to a specific location. This yields, from our initial experiments, this yields better results than the orbit level. But again, this really depends on your landscape and on your area of interest. Okay. So sorry I couldn't show you much for Jedi Correct and Jedi Pipeline. It's a shame because the website couldn't let me log in. So let me let me return to my presentation. Okay. So this is the part we will go for questions. Okay. Let me share the screen. Okay. So we have probably 10 minutes. Sorry for the late presentation. We have probably 10 minutes for questions. So feel free to ask if you want. Ask anything, any question. And Yeah, so I'm open.
Doctor, tenemos preguntas en el chat del Meet. Si nos puede apoyar en responder, por favor. Contamos con 4 a 5 preguntas para que pueda apoyarnos en responderlas.
Hi.
Hello.
Well, we are grateful for your presentation. It's very interesting. The new LiDAR technologies emerging for application in new research. We have some question for you.
Okay.
The number one is, how do you determine the parameters for using LiDAR metrics? It's number one. And two is, have you ever detected any errors in the terrestrial LiDAR calibration?
Okay. So for the first question, how do you determine the parameters for using LiDAR metrics? I don't know what you mean with that question because it really depends on the instrument, and the LiDAR instrument, probably. So for different LiDAR metrics, let's say eyesight 2, you have other LiDAR metrics, for example. For JEDI, you have vegetation parameters. Okay, these instruments were designed for one thing, and yeah, I don't know what you mean with that question. Sorry. And for number two, have you ever detected any errors in terrestrial LiDAR calibration? I personally didn't use uh, TLS for, I think that's the question, right? For terrestrial LiDAR. I personally didn't use it yet, but no, so for my part, there's no errors because I didn't use it. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you for your response. We have another question about Jimmy. He says, can the background biomass of natural grasslands, such the pampas in Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil, or the grassland in Venezuela and Colombia, be estimated using GEDI data?
I think yes, of course, because on those countries you mentioned about, there's JEDI covers those countries. So if you download the L4A data product, which estimates above ground biomass for each footprint, of course, yeah, you can estimate the above ground biomass of those places where the footprints sit on the L4A data product. But again, this is sparse data, and it does not encompass all of the region of interest. Okay, so if you would want to estimate above ground biomass continuously, if you would want to create a map of the above ground biomass, you would have to fuse it with other data like Sentinel-2 or radar and train a machine learning model to predict for each pixel what would be the above ground biomass for that map. Okay. So the question to the answer, yes. Short answer, yes. Long answer, maybe, if you fuse it with other data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your response. And the last question is Eduardo. How to extract 3D trees from LiDAR in QGIS and calculate canopy, DBH, and crop?
How to extract 3D trees from LiDAR in QGIS. From my experience, I think I haven't seen any tools that do that. But I have seen, for example, R LiDAR, which is used in R. You can specify an ALS file or a LAS file, and you can extract the three-dimensional structure of a tree. Okay. If you want to go for some spicy things, you can extract those 3D trees from the ALS and pair it with a JEDI footprint, for example. And you could compare the waveform and try to interpolate those two data sets and try to recreate a three-dimensional structure of that place. But you would have to be very lucky. If it would be imagine a 25 by 25 meter area, you would have to be very lucky that the JEDI footprint would pass in that area. Yeah. I think that's the question you want to.
Thank you for your response again. And we appreciate for your presentation. We have one question more, I think.
Alexander raised his hand. Yes, Alexander.
Yeah, I would like to thank you for your presentation, for your support today. I'm sure that in near future we will collaborate in some projects. Thank you very much. And I would like to explain a little bit in Spanish. I don't know if it is possible.
Okay, I will try.
Solo quería agradecer por tu presentación el día de hoy. Yo sé que vamos a seguir trabajando, colaborando. La parte más un poco que toma tiempo es acceder a los datos, el preprocesamiento, y una vez que tenemos esa información, pues podemos proceder con múltiples análisis. Quizá tu presentación, tu correo, para que puedan contactarte también. Puedes ponerlo nuevamente en pantalla para el acceso.
Claro.
Y si alguien está interesado en trabajar con JEDI, pues está ahí Leonel, está también mi persona, que venimos ya hace algún tiempo trabajando y esperamos tener un taller un poco más a detalle, con casos específicos donde podamos realizar los análisis. Muchas gracias por tu presentación y esperando estar en contacto.
Muchísimas gracias por tus palabras, Alexander. Fue un enorme gusto presentar los JEDI a ustedes. Espero que mi español esté bueno. Voy a terminar la presentación en español, creo. Solo quería presentar los dos materiales que tengo aquí. Son los websites que yo uso y podría servos útiles. Y unos papers, ok, para que lean. Y si quieren saber más sobre JEDI, podréis leer los repositorios que tengo y bueno, y para cualquier pregunta o question o posible colaboración, tenéis mi email yo estaré disponible para responder a todo. Muchísimas gracias por todo y por la oportunidad. Muchas gracias.
Bien, gracias, doctor Leonel Coronado. Igualmente agradecemos a Alexander, gracias por tu participación. En unos momentos vamos a tener un receso de 15 minutos y regresamos con la próxima ponencia a cargo del ingeniero John Anthony Zabaleta Santiesteban. Estamos retornando a las 11:45. Muchas gracias.